Good morning, everybody. Before I get started, I just want to call out that I was here last year when we did the DevFest. Can everyone hear me, by the way? It's hard to tell. Okay, cool. I was here last year, and so I can see there's some familiar faces. Can I get a rough showing of hands of who's this is the first time you've come to a DevFest or a GDG Sydney meetup? That's awesome. So roughly 50%. So fantastic. Also, before I get started, I would just like to call out our GDG organizers. Can we get a round of applause for putting all of this together? It's a tremendous amount of work, and these people are really, really dedicated. I get to work with them a few times a year, and I'm always appreciative of everything that they do for the whole community. So, with that said, what was that, Andy?
You're the greatest.
With that said, thanks for coming, everybody. My name is Ankur Kotwal. I'm a developer advocate at Google Sydney. I've been there for a little bit over 5 years. And actually, I've been part of the GDG Sydney community for about 6 and a bit years. So it's near and dear to my heart, and I always love to come and meet folks, share whatever knowledge we have as well. So today I'm going to talk to you about app development, and specifically how app development has changed over time, and how we're trying to enable it to be easier for developers through Firebase. Firebase has the tools and infrastructure that you need to build better apps. And Firebase is a product that existed for a couple of years, but at Google I/O 2016 in May, so about 6 months ago, we vastly expanded the features that Firebase offers. And the reason that we did that is because at Google, we've been building mobile apps for about 10 years. So we appreciate sort of the complexities that come with doing it. And I would say actually specifically in about the last 5 years, building a successful app has become increasingly difficult. And we saw this as a pain point for developers. Because at the end of the day, you've got your SDKs for iOS, you've got your SDKs for Android, but they enable you to build a core set of functionality for your users. Often we end up spending a lot of time and effort building kind of fundamental building blocks. And our users' expectations of what an app should provide have changed as well. So I'm sure you're the same, but when I install an app from the Play Store or the App Store, I have certain expectations of what the app is going to do. I don't really think about whether it's a new app or it's an app that's been around for many, many years, whether it's been built by a large company or a small indie developer. There's just some expectations that come with it. And the types of expectations that we have are that, hey, it's gonna, if I've got a smartwatch, it's gonna work with it, whether it's Apple Watch or Android Wear. If I've got a smart TV, I may have an experience where I can cast to that screen. We are now starting to see a whole raft of connected devices in the home. And so there's starting to be expectations around how all of that information integrates together. So it's getting harder and harder. And then when you think about it from other perspectives, you want to be able to provide a personalized experience for your users. And often that means they need to sign in. At some point in time, we need to get to know the person. We want to protect them with some credentials, a username and a password. Building out that infrastructure is a lot of work. And it's actually quite annoying even from a user standpoint. I'm sure you've all been there where you've launched an app for the first time and the first thing you're prompted with is a registration screen. It's not a great experience. And so, we tried to solve this problem on the web and our mobile platforms with things like federated sign-in, right? Where users can sign in with their Facebook or Google or GitHub and Twitter accounts. But this is work for a developer to have to do. Right? For each of these types of sign-ins that you want to add to your mobile apps, it's work. But it's a user expectation. Another expectation is that, as users today, we have lots and lots of devices. Most folks I know have a desktop or a workstation, maybe both. They tend to have a smartphone. They may have a tablet, they may have a watch. And there's this expectation that as you use that app or service across one device, it'll synchronize across the rest of your devices, right? So if you're reading an RSS reader for your daily news, you might start looking at it on your phone on your way into work, let's say, and when you get to work, you might switch to your desktop or your laptop, and you expect to be able to continue that. You expect that that app or service will remember how far you had read through, things that you've already covered. You'd be able to sign in and just continue. Again, getting this synchronization, it's a basic user expectation, but not always so easy to implement, or just takes time. We know that content sharing is really, really popular across all of our platforms. And again, the expectation here is when I share a piece of content with someone else and they click that link, that it deep links to that particular post. So if I share an image with someone on, let's say, WhatsApp, on Facebook, when they click that link, it's not going to just open up the home screen of the Facebook app, it's going to open up onto that post and people can be able to comment on it and so on. So deep linking. It's another feature that people expect. And so with all of these sort of developer challenges coming across, it really inspired us to create Firebase, to make app development simple and to power every developer with the tools that you need to build modern, successful apps. What we want to do is let you focus on innovation, not on infrastructure. Focus on the feature set that differentiates your app, your service, not on all of the little building blocks that are kind of base expectations. So out of the box, Firebase is a single solution that has 14 features that you can use to build better apps. Now, building the best possible apps goes beyond just the tools that help you write code. You also need tools to help grow your app and to earn income for all the hard work that you've put in. So when we think and talk about Firebase, we talk about it across 3 pillars: develop, grow, and earn. And offerings under develop, they're the things that you use when you're coding your app, right? Things like authentication, storage, real-time device syncing, notifications, fundamentals. But under this category, we also have app quality services. Things like Firebase Test Lab, crash reporting. And we're going to cover a few of these in a minute. But these come together to help you build rock-solid, high-quality apps. In the grow and earn sections, we're helping to provide tools that help you acquire new users, retain them, keep them engaged, and also help you monetize through those users. Many of these features that we've been talking about are automatically and consistently integrated into Firebase Analytics. Now, Firebase Analytics is an entirely new product that we built. It is not the same as Google Analytics. We started it from the ground up, but we actually brought across many of those experts from Google Analytics to build this product. And it is very much a mobile-centric product. Google Analytics was built at a time when it was, it was really built for the web. Firebase Analytics is really, really built for your mobile apps. And it really brings and fuses all of these different services together. And I'm going to show you some examples a bit later on in this presentation about that. So let me give you a very brief tour on a couple of my favorite Firebase offerings. And the first one is remote config. So often in our apps, we have some sort of parameter, some configurable parameter that we put into our app, into our APK. And if we want to update that parameter, so it might be something as simple as, hey, in my list view, how many rows can I see on a certain density, certain size or density device? It might be, how often do I need to pull my backend to see if the data is fresh? Right, just configurable information. What remote config allows you to do is put that sort of parameter into a configuration that ships with the device but can be overridden through the Firebase Console. And so just by signing into your Firebase Console, you can actually go ahead and update that value. Let's say it's that freshness value I was talking about, how often we should pull the backend. And in the console, we can just update that value. Next time your app or activity starts, you can get the latest value and have your users working off your latest configuration. It's all seamless. It doesn't require an app update. Now, that's the sort of thing I'm sure many of you that have built this sort of service are like, you know what, it's not too hard to build something like that, I've probably got something. Remote config goes a lot further though. There's this really cool part of it through analytics, because analytics and remote config work very well together. We are able to cluster our users in things that we call audiences. And so you can define an audience in the console based on various analytics events that you're capturing. So for your most engaged users, you could create an audience that's like, hey, these are my most engaged users. And then you can send remote config updates specifically to those audiences. So you can segment them. And so the nice thing is you get this tremendous capability from the Firebase Console to see how users are using your apps and adjust the behavior of your apps towards those users. You don't need to have a global value that's like an on or off, or here's my polling interval. For more engaged users, you might want to check more frequently. For less engaged users, maybe less frequently. You can tie this in with notifications as well. So remote config is like immensely powerful, even though at a surface level looks like a fairly straightforward feature. I'm going to show you an example in the second half of this preso. Databases are another one of these sort of areas that most developers, myself included, I don't enjoy writing database code. Databases are usually a means to an end. I need to store some data. But particularly when you have scenarios like this, we saw this image earlier, where the user makes some sort of operation on one device and you need to have that reflected, you tend to write to a local database, you tend to somehow want to sync that information back up to the server and then have it pushed out to the other devices. RealTime Database really solves this problem, because you just have to write to that database locally and it will manage the synchronization for you. It'll send it up to the back-end infrastructure, it'll push it out to the devices, and they'll all stay in sync. And you still have things like access control, so it doesn't mean that every user is getting every event. You can basically register for events at various parts of your database. It's really, really neat. I mentioned authentication as a pain point, and this is again an area that we've tackled directly with Firebase Authentication, where you can actually continue to have your own login scheme with a username or password, but just by making changes in the Firebase console, you can add these other forms of login. And so we've already integrated these auth providers in our console, so it's just a matter of enabling a switch. So now you're able to start to see those pain points that I talked about earlier. We have products that like directly address those. It's really worth having a look at how much code you can eliminate in your code base just by adopting some of this. And if you're starting a new project, to me it's a bit of a no-brainer to look at Firebase. Switching gears from sort of developing products to testing them, we provide a tool called Firebase Test Lab. And with Firebase Test Lab, we have data centers all over the world with both physical and virtual devices. And so you can basically have your app run on these devices, whether you own them or not, right? You no longer need to have a cabinet full of devices. You can rely on Test Lab to run that information for you. So what we do with Firebase Test Lab is you take your app, you get it to run on many, many devices, right? And the way that it runs on these devices is that you can write instrumentation tests, or you can rely on our friendly robo-tester who'll go and explore your app, go and find different screens to click through, and so on. And then once it does that, you get a nice, friendly, detailed report that says, these are the activities that I took, these are the flows that I went through, and these are the results that I got. And you can have this just run across as many devices as you like, really. So one of the things that we very recently just announced is that up until now, Firebase Test Lab was only on Firebase's paid offerings. And as of very recently, we now have a tier of Firebase Test Lab access on the free plan, the Spark plan, where you get access to 5 physical devices or 10 virtual devices, even on the Spark plan there. So if you want to just test it out, just see how useful it is to you, provide us with some feedback, you can now do it even on the Spark plan. I expect that you'll probably really like it. But of course, we're continuing to listen to feedback from all of you, from all our developers. And one of the pieces of feedback that we've had is that, hey, we need lots more device types. We already have quite a few, but developers are asking for more. And so we're hard at work on this. And since I/O, since May, so within the last 6 months, we've almost doubled the types of devices that we have in Firebase Test Lab. And we're continuing to invest in making more and more of these available. We're also focused on giving you more API diversity in Firebase Test Lab. So you'll have more device types with various versions of the platform, so you can get confidence in how your app runs across all of those. So that's Test Lab. But even after all of our QA and testing, we occasionally run into crashes. We still get a product that launches, and we have crashes out there. We built Firebase crash reporting for this purpose. Now, Firebase is a cross-platform set of tools, and crash reporting is one of those features that's available both on Android and iOS. And the cool thing is, enabling it is really, really trivial. So to add crash reporting to your app, it really doesn't take much work for you to have it. And basically, when your app crashes, it'll capture a bunch of diagnostic information and make it available to you in the Firebase Console, which we'll have a look at. You can actually have a look at those crashes based on like how bad it is, how frequent it is, how many users are affected, so you can triage by impact. And as I've mentioned, we work quite well with analytics here as well. We integrate deeply. So if you have a look at the console, and here it is, here's the mobile view of the console. You can actually just look at it on your phone if you like. You can see that we give you a nice graph that sort of shows you how many crashes you're having. You can start to see trends. And then across the bottom, we have clusters. So if you've got different crashes, if you've got many different crashes, we cluster it by crash so that you can treat those in logical groups as well. And when we dive in deeper to any of those groups, we can start to see, well, how many users are being affected by this specific crash? What are the types of errors we're having? And we give you other diagnostic information that could be useful. Is it on a particular version of the OS or a particular type of device? So on and so forth. With crash reporting, you can also have alerts. So if your crash rates start to spike on a specific crash, or there's a bunch of new incoming crashes, you can get alerted on that. We're able to track that you've resolved issues and things are starting to downtrend. And of course, we bring all those logs that we make available to you so that you can integrate with analytics and start to get very detailed workflows of what were the step-by-step actions that resulted in that specific crash. So those are just a few of the capabilities that we have in Firebase. Overall, there's 14 products, and we couldn't be happier. So it's been 6 months since we launched this iteration of Firebase, and the question that I get quite frequently is, well, how is it doing? Like, are developers using it? So I'm really happy to share with you that as of this point, we have 750,000 developers that are using Firebase across their apps. And these aren't just one-man developers. Some of these are large commercial developers. I'm sure there's many logos there, company logos there that you can recognize. And they're using them for basic purposes, but also very complex ones. So we're really happy with this. When we set out to do Firebase, we really thought about the developer pain points. And as we've launched it and we've started to see developers embrace Firebase, it helps us to realize that it's validated our concerns that, app development could be easier, and that you'd rather spend your time working on your service or your sort of unique proposition rather than these basic fundamental pieces of infrastructure. But I also want to say that within the last 6 months, we haven't just been sitting on our hands. We've actually, in those 6 months, had 31 updates to Firebase. So we are working really hard to continue to add more and more functionality to every one of those products. Our vision with Firebase is to make app development really, really easy. And this is only the start of our journey. I've talked about those 14 offerings of Firebase today, and we're looking to expand that set of technologies as well. So stay tuned, because over the coming months, you're going to see more and more product updates here. In general, I think Firebase is something that's actually very easy to adopt and get going. It can solve many of your sort of very fundamental needs in a very, very quick manner. And so what I want to do is now shift gears in this presentation. I've given you a brief overview of what Firebase is. I'm going to talk to you about one of my pet projects at Google. So as I mentioned, I joined Google about 5.5 years ago. And at that time, I was looking for a 20% project. So at Google, we have this concept of 20% projects where you can spend 20% of your time working on something that's separate to your regular projects. And we had this long-standing tradition of something called Google Santa Tracker. With Santa Tracker, I'm going to show you what it is. But at that time, we had a website, and we were looking to just start that website from scratch, just reboot it completely. And I asked the product manager of that team, hey, why don't we have an Android app for this? And he said, great idea, when can you have it done? So basically at that point, I got really excited, and for the last 5 years I've been working on, around this time of the year, we work on Google Santa Tracker. And what Santa Tracker is it's a website and an app that allows you to track Santa as he delivers presents on December 24th. So as he travels around the world, you can see which cities he's visiting. And of course, real time, we've put some really top-notch location technology on Santa's sleigh. So he's giving us this information in real time, and we show him on a map. But we've gone beyond that, where we not only have the website, but we also have an Android app. And throughout the month of December, every day in December up until the 25th, we unlock a new game or an activity on our website for people to play. And this stuff is really fun for children and grown-ups alike. On Android, our Android app actually works on phones, tablets, Android TV, Android Wear, and we also integrate with Chromecast, so you can get a big screen experience if you want. Today, what I'm going to talk to you about is a new game that we've included with Santa Tracker 2016 called PresentQuest. I was the product manager I am the product manager for Santa Tracker on Android. And so this is a new game that we've built out. I'm going to just cover a little bit about what this game does, and then show you how Firebase made it so much easier to build for. So what's happened this year with 2016 is as Santa's been getting ready to go and deliver presents, he's running late. And his reindeers and his helper elves, they don't deal well under pressure. So what's ended up happening is as the presents go from around the world to the North Pole, they're actually falling off those sleighs. And so it's up to us to walk the world and go collect these presents and return them to Santa's workshop so that we can save Christmas. So, this is the game. It's a location-based game where you start off... Whoops, I meant to go back. Sorry, I clicked one too early. There we go. It's a location-based game where you start off with your character on a map, and you have to walk around the real world to go and find areas where presents are falling. So you see these red markers? That's where there's areas around you where presents are falling down. And so you need to walk in the real world to get there, and then tap one of those markers. At that point, when you tap one of those markers, we kick off a mini game where your character dons a jetpack, and you get to go and catch falling presents from the sky. So here it is here, it's an accelerometer-based game, and so we sit there catching presents. And what you really want to do is avoid the coal. You'll see it there and there, because coal is bad. You get a limited amount of time to do this. Once you've caught those presents sit in your backpack. So you help save the presents, but you haven't returned them to Santa yet. So the next stage is that you need to walk the world to go and find Santa's workshops. And we allow users to place these workshops where it's convenient to them. So they may place them by their home, they may place them around their workplace, and it's all stored locally. The state of the workshop is not global at all. So anyways, you walk to your workshop, and then you tap that, and it kicks off, yep, another mini game. And here, in this game, what you have to do is flick presents from your backpack into Santa's sack. So you sit there, it's a nice little fun way to get some presents in. Now remember I said earlier that these elves don't work well under pressure? Well, they're not actually trying to be jerks here and stop us from submitting presents. They just don't know how to handle the chaos. So you see them running side to side. And the pro players here actually use rebounds off the side walls to submit these presents. But anyways, once you've submitted these presents, you get a score, and then based on that, you're able to do some sort of progression. So, of course, the type of progression that everyone wants is to be able to level up. You can unlock different avatars. So we've got the bear here, we've got a walrus, and a number of characters. But you'll also see we've got a number of workshops there. So you can have your workshops, you can unlock a various different types of workshops, different numbers of workshops. So that's the game. We think it's pretty fun. We've play tested it a bit and we enjoyed doing it. And that's my spiel on Santa Tracker done. But let me now talk about real work. Let me talk about Firebase. So when we build Santa Tracker, one of the things that we get from building Santa Tracker is that we get to include technologies that haven't necessarily been released yet in Santa Tracker. So we were one of the first Google apps to do an Android app, Android TV app, sorry, well before any of our other non-preloaded apps came out there. We were one of the first Google apps to add Santa watch faces. So if you look at my watch later on, you can see I've got Santa Claus and some elves on there as well. Last year, we were fortunate enough to actually have access to early versions of Firebase. And this year, we've expanded that integration as well. So let me talk to you about some things that have really, really helped us out in building this sort of thing. We, of course, use Firebase Test Lab to make sure that our app works well across any number of devices. Now, a game like Santa Tracker, we want to make sure that it runs on low-end devices as well as premium devices, and that it takes advantage of all the graphical capabilities of everything in between. So it needs to scale up and down. So Firebase Test Lab really helps us here because we're able to test across a number of devices. Don't be dismayed by this screenshot. Santa Tracker does work and pass all the tests on Nexus devices. This is a development build. So I just wanted to show you that this is, as we ran through some of our testing, I'm sorry you can't see the text, but in the console it basically says, you know, these tests took between 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes to run on the various devices, and the kind of failures that we got. So that was really useful to help us test Santa at scale as we made changes. The next thing we look at is analytics. And so we have put in, with Firebase Analytics, we've put in a number of events. And we're able to get some really nice, interesting views. So this here is a view, an aggregated view of sort of where the players are around the world. And we're able to glean some really, really interesting data from this. So with PresentQuest specifically, we've seen that like a couple of days ago we had lots of usage in places like Chicago. But if that usage was to drop, you know, normally when the usage of your game drops, it's not easy to tell why it is that it's dropping. With the case of Firebase Analytics and this sort of worldview, what we've started to see is as the weather changes, it really impacts our engagement, right? Because it's a game that you have to play in the real world. So when it's really cold, or when it snows, or when it rains, our usage drops, and we're able to make those sorts of conclusions just by looking at the various amounts of data that we have, and this sort of view really helps us. Now, PresentQuest was an interesting game to design because designing something like this and making it fun can be a challenge, and it's not an exact science. So as we were designing it, we had all this information around, well, how many presents should we have on the map around you? How far do you need to walk to get to those presents? And I think we settled on about 1.5 kilometer radius is where we spawn a bunch of presents on the map. And you have to be within 150 meters in order to tap a present. And the reason we kept that sort of radius, the 150 meters, is so that users didn't actually have to walk into commercial buildings or anything like that. They could be on the street and still be able to reach those presents. Now, as we were building this game out, we wanted to be able to rapidly change and test these values. And remote config really helped us. Because we put all of this data, on the right-hand side you've got Android Studio where we put XML defaults for those values, but those are actually all stored in remote config. And what this meant is that as we were out and about testing it in the real world, just on our phones, we could change the values, and suddenly our app, the model in our app would change. And we could see that, oh, you know what, this radius works a little bit better. We should have a higher density of presence, or we should have more workshops. So another anecdotal story is that one of our testers, who was actually in Sydney, but he'd flown to the US, he's like, oh, you know what, I went out one afternoon and I was testing the game, and I realized that I left my Santa's workshop back in the office. That's where I stored it. But as I went and collected presents and my bag got full, I could no longer collect new presents, but I had to go back 1.5 kilometers just to go and submit them. It locked him out of playing the game and engaging with it. And so through remote config, we were able to easily say, you know what, we can be more lenient about this. We'll let you play the game, play some of the mini games even if your bag is full, you just can't grow your bag. We'll give you an extra workshop depending on certain conditions being met. And we were able to rapidly test this just thanks to Firebase remote config here. And then I want to tell you about a somewhat embarrassing story from last year that I think we recovered pretty well from. So we launched it last year, and we did have remote config integration in place. And what we found is that it was crashing on a number of devices, this specific, not PresentQuest, but one of the other mini games. And whilst we got the crasher information back, and when our engineers were looking at sort of diagnosing and debugging the problem, we wanted to make sure that users didn't have a bad experience, that they weren't getting that crash even whilst it wasn't fixed. Now, a traditional way to do this, because we had server-side flags, would have been that we would just have turned off the game server-side and it wouldn't show up until we'd fixed it. But that would have locked out all of these users, and something like 80% or 90% of our users were not affected. So we didn't want to lock them out of this experience. But we also didn't want those users that did have those crashes to experience them, because everyone values their Play Store ratings, right? Nobody wants to have comments in there about crashes. So what we were able to do is, using Firebase Analytics, we were able to identify a set of conditions that, when combined, would actually be the device type that it crashed on. So we looked at our Firebase Analytics data and we're like, oh, it's this type of device with this sort of density on this API level. And it was basically, we'd miss some assets at a particular density bucket, and we do some funky stuff with the way the graphics work, so that we have fewer assets. But anyways, we'd obviously mucked something up at that point. So with Firebase Analytics, we found that group or cluster of users that would have been affected, and we created a new audience in the console. And then, using Firebase remote config, we turned that particular game off only for that cluster of people. So those 80–90% of users that were not affected could still play the game. Those few users that were affected, they didn't have the game available to them. But in that 48 hours since we found this issue, we fixed it in about 48 hours. It took about a day to code it, diagnose and fix it, another day to test it, and we pushed it out. But that meant that we could provide a great experience for all our users. And we were able to also go as far as saying, leave the game turned off for users that are in this category and don't have the latest version of the app, all through remote config. So that was a really nice way for us to recover what could have been a really bad and overly embarrassing situation. So I just want to conclude by saying that we really think that Firebase the full set of Firebase products help solve very fundamental developer pain points. And I hope that you've seen that through examples like Santa Tracker, that we're able to use it in sort of ways that I personally hadn't imagined to really help us provide our users with a better experience. And in turn, us as developers also have a better experience. We're using it to build better apps. So thank you very much.